Hello and welcome to the third part of the first part of the Venice project. I'm going to start by launching the program and going to the content browser, software, pack, and finding the map for Venice, map Venice demo, launching that. Now, I'm just going to reset this because this is the second time doing this because the screen capture didn't like me saving the animation that I created. So I'm going to create a new animation from scratch and not physically press the save button so that I don't have to do the whole thing a third time. So here we go. We're in Venice, and what I'm going to do is start by creating a level sequence. This effectively is a timeline onto which I can drop the characters that we put in place at the end of the second session. That was Mr. Pink, and somewhere over there, Mr. Green. And what we're going to do is have them moving in animated fashion. The principle is we'll try and get them to kind of converge, or at least indicate the ways in which they might converge in this area down here, like this. So the first thing I need to do is create what's called a sequence. I go up here, Cinematics, and create Add Level Sequence. And I created a folder already last time I did this. Create the sequence Walk 1. This is now going to be Walk 2. You, of course, can call it what you like. Brand new empty sequence here like this, and I'm just going to delete the cameras I created previously because we'll do that from scratch again. So a sequence, for those of you who've worked in Premiere or iMovie or Resolve, any kind of video editing program, is essentially a timeline with tracks, and you can place different tracks onto the timeline. You can add keyframes to indicate movement and position, and you do that not only to characters, but once we've done that, we'll also do it to cameras as well. So you'll see that you can, by manipulating the values of the keyframes, shifting them around, you can create a meaningful sequence of actions. So let's start by animating Mr. Pink. And what I'm going to do is keys to go over here. We're going to get Mr. Pink to kind of walk in that general direction. Now, the first thing we need to do is to actually add Mr. Pink to the sequence. We do that by highlighting the character, choose Track, Add Sequencer, because I've highlighted it. Yes, Mr. Pink. And while I'm here, I might as well add Mr. Green as well. So here, Track, Add Sequence, Add Mr. Green. That's highlighted there. Like that. Let's close up the stuff folder. Better. Right, we'll focus on Mr. Pink for the time being. As I added these elements, two tracks appeared. One animation where we're going to drop the different animations we're going to be using shortly, and the other one, transform. Now this replicates what we've been doing either with the handles or down here, these values, but to actually have the changes take place over time, we need to add them as keyframes on this timeline. The timeline is set at the moment at 30 frames per second, and the animations that we'll be looking at in more detail that we grab from Mixamo can either be generated at 30 or 60 frames a second. I generally tend to work in 30 frames a second because otherwise the kind of file size can get quite a bit larger. So I would suggest is you just leave it like that for the time being. The other thing I would suggest as well is when you're working on time frame, rather than start mucking around and going into negative values, I generally take about frame 60, i.e. 2 seconds in, as the point at which anything meaningful is going to happen. It does mean that I can have a kind of one-to-one relationship between the frame numbers here and when I drop it in to something like Premiere, because if I'm working on a reference of, I start at -10 frames here, but on frame 0 in Premiere, then things get kind of messy. So I generally tend to start around about there. So start position, Mr. Green, Mr. Pink. Sorry, Mr. Pink. Is, let's assume he's actually going to start where he is at the moment. So what I'll need to do is to set that by creating keyframes. Got some 12s down here, location and rotation. If I click this top one here, location, it will set them for all three of the axes. Similarly for rotation, all three of the axes there. Unless your character is going to shrink and enlarge over a period of time, then you probably don't want to worry yourself about scale as an issue. You've got a work area here. It's by default set at 0 frames and goes up to the moment at 150, with the entirety of the timeline ending at 165. To extend this, it's as simple as, so let's say, just for argument's sake, it's going to be 600 frames is 20 seconds, isn't it? So that's an easier figure to work with. 600. Okay, 600. So now, if I wanted to, I've got a kind of canvas that goes up to 600 frames from in to out. And like Adobe products, if you want to zoom in, you grab the end of this scroll bar here, and you can zoom in to see individual frames. You can see the numbering alters suit, and you grab the middle of it to scrub back and forth. So I've got a starting position there like that. Now I can probably guesstimate this. Let's say we just want the character to go down to about there. Let's say, so 60 is 2 seconds, and let's say 10 seconds to get there. So that 10 seconds is 300. So if I want to go to frame 360 and put another keyframe there, I may be way out, but let's just do this to start with 360 there. So initially what I'm going to do is just replicate this. Now, because I haven't moved the character, these keyframes have exactly the same value. So if I was to scrub through this timeline, nothing is going to happen because they're identical values. But what I'm going to do is move to this keyframe here and then change the values by scrubbing here. If I do it here, the character will move, but it's not going to register on the timeline. I have to change the values that exist in this area here. So let's pull out a bit, and I think, now you can see the obvious problem. If I just walk straight forward, increase the value there, I'm going to run into that pillar there like that. Let's go forward. Let's say we're going to go that far forward. So we do need to not only move forward, but also sideways, so we're clear of that particular obstruction. And we'll look at it from here and look at it there. And doing that, yeah, I'd probably rotate. The arm's going through there, isn't it? That's not good. So like this, just move a bit further across. No, yeah, there. Now, is the arm going to hit? Possibly not. I'll just tweak it back a little bit, but given that we're, see, I put a mid keyframe in there because I didn't move it to the start. So if I did want to describe a kind of arching walk, then I would do that. Come back here, or I could just press Ctrl Z and that keyframe disappears. What I did want to do actually was to go here and just move, tweak back this. So I could type in numeric values here, so 650, 670. Let's try 700. Yeah, and okay, I'm going to live with that. I think with the animation it'll work. The other thing I'd probably want to change, and I'll change it on both the keyframes, is that he was looking straight ahead, and now we've kind of made an arc, a path rather, that is slightly tilted. So maybe I just want to rotate the character in the direction of the path. So so I changed it there, 105. Let's make it minus 105 degrees there. and go to use these arrows to go to the next keyframe, make it -105, so we're not tilting from one to another. Let's see. Yeah, and it's kind of now sort of at straight on to that line there. So now I've achieved this character. I can use the play controls here. Achieved this character moving over time from here to there. Now what you'll notice is that this is a kind of what's called cubic, in that the animation starts slow, builds up to a regular speed, and then slows down at the end. So if I play it here, it eases in. It's actually called Easy Ease in Premiere and After Effects. But because we want perpetual constant motion, what we're going to do is change the nature of these keyframes. So highlight all of them and change them from cubic auto to linear. So now the movement will be constant throughout. Now I can already tell that that's taking way too long to get from here to there, I would suggest. But the real measure of whether that is the case is if we stick an animation on that. And what you'll notice is that the two tracks created for each of these characters, there is one for the transform and there is another one for animation. So I can scroll up and down that. So we started at 16, so let's come back. This is why you leave yourself some buffer. So I want the animation playing before the movement begins, so let's say 15 frames before that. And what I can do, click here, add an animation, and all those animations we brought in last time are available to me because we tied them to this skeleton, so they'll also be available for Mr. Green as well. So we're going to grab the walking one. Now, the duration of the walking one looks to me like it goes from 45 to 75, so it is probably about 1 second as a loop. If I need to extend that, which clearly I do, if I drag this out, what you'll notice is some little bars come down there. This is kind of the points at which the looping is going on. And that's now applied to this character. So if I were to play this back now, the animation is playing, the character is moving forward. Now we will come up with a better animation when we look at characters in more depth there, and it is on the floor. But we probably need to get a perspective where we can judge whether this either looks like a travelator or moonwalking. In other words, that the animation doesn't really correspond with the distance travelled and the speed. So let's have a look. Not too bad. Maybe it takes too long. So my options here would be either to move the character, if it takes too long, either to move the character further forward, so to go to this point here and then increase this. I'm going to undo that. Or the other option would be to grab hold of all of these and pull this back, so it takes less time to get from there to there. So a few less. So I can tweak that, but I've got a walking animation there going from one point to another. Now at the moment, the walking animation just carries on, and that doesn't look too convincing because it's not going anywhere. This is where you grab another animation. So let's put this ending there for the moment. The bar there, because what we're going to do is come animation track again and choose idle. Now, the particular idle we've got here is very subtle. If you were to look intently at the character, you will see that they are kind of breathing, so they haven't technically died. But to create the blend between one animation and another, what you do is you move one back over the other. We could start with probably having the kind of midpoint that. And what I would do is probably tweak this. Now there's a bit of sliding, if you notice there, going on now, because it comes to an idle, and that's a bit better. The other thing I can do, this is a kind of crude measure, and when we look in more detail at characters and animations, there's better ways of doing this. But what I can do, if I'm really not happy with the speed of this animation, is that I can go into the properties for, this is in instance the walking animation, and just turn this down slightly, so it's slightly slower. So I've changed it from 1 normal speed to 0.9, so it's 90% of speed. So this isn't distance traveled, it's just so now there's a kind of slightly more sedate walk, maybe sliding slightly, a tweak, and then we come to a halt. Because I changed that to 0.9, the point here, let's try that. Okay, and comes to a halt there, like that. Similarly, I could have this idle, so we've reached a stop here, and I could put another set of keyframes in here. And I'll probably change these to, by default they go to cubic, and I'm sure there's a way you can set up the default to be linear, but let's just change these to linear. So this means I'm going to idle on this spot here like this, and you can see there is, I scrub through, there is a bit of idling going on there. And what I want to do then is either could carry on walking, let's just do that for argument's sake, so it'd be coming out of that and doing the kind of reverse of what we did previously. So go up to the animation track, choose walk. And then what I might want to do, I'm not going to do it now because I want to move on and cover something else, is if I then move this forward and apply a left turn to have the character turn towards me, blend that with the walk, still keep moving forward, but changing also, I'll just show you the left turn animation. It doesn't actually turn the character, but it does the gesture as if it is turning left. And then what you do is you need to rotate the character. So left turn is a kind of step there, but it doesn't really read as a left turn unless I also add keyframes to rotate the character towards the left. So this gesture is carried out as the character is rotated left. At the moment it looks a kind of odd. Walking, turning, but so let's just add in a keyframe here. So we want to be here, you're there, and very crudely show you this. It's quite a period of time too. Didn't want that one. Just highlight that, move that. Okay, so it's 105 there, so we'll go to the next one and actually turn to the left. It's much too long, see. Yeah, that there. And probably move this forward at the same time, because at the moment I'm left turning on the spot, which doesn't make much sense. So I would also add keyframes to have some forward movement. So going from the walking to the left turn, I do that by blending these particular keyframes. The other thing, the reason we put Mr. Green here, was that we also have to address things like height. So if I wanted Mr. Green to go up these steps, I don't have a walking up the steps animation, but I do have basic walking, and I can cheat this phenomenon. I've got Mr. Green already added to this here, so let's first of all create a starting frame 60. It's green. It's going to start here. And let's say he's going to be up the steps by this point here. So replicate this and then move the character, and then it will transform between those values. So now, because we're 90 degrees, this is the one that should do it. Now, without doing this, what you'll notice is that the character has now disappeared into there. So we also need to increase the height. Now, if I do it at the moment, let's just green, what's going to happen is that it's going to go from there up to this point here, which is the end point, but the steps actually begin there. So what I'm going to do is come back to the point where it's still at the base of the steps and add another keyframe to ensure that that ground level is still there. Let's get as close to the steps as we can. Oh. This is what you have to avoid doing. I have to do it by frame, not by like sliding the character. So there, that's the point at which, yes, still on the ground there. And when we get to this next keyframe, I'm going to change these to linear once I've got there. Are we at the top of the steps there? Oh, let's move forward a bit more. So this way. I could possibly use. Now I've gone too far. Let's just come back. We just need to find a good position to eyeball this from. Right. Yeah. Stop it there. Right, just at the top of the steps there, I believe. Crazy. Why? Okay. Let's do it from the side then. Okay, there. Now what I'm going to do is take this character up. I think around about 1,000 should do it. Have a look. Is that too high? No, that's about right. And yeah, so I've got a keyframe at the bottom of the steps, and then I'm going up the steps there like that. Now let's add, just for argument's sake, to change this around a bit, let's add a running animation, although it's probably, and just drag this out, extend over this period of time. Let's make these linear. And then right click here, choose linear. And very slow for a run, but because I've got this here like this, I want to start at that point. If I think the relative amount of time I didn't pull back enough to see whether it looked ridiculously slow to start with, let's have a look. So that's definitely got to come back a lot. I can just grab this keyframe and move that back to there. And that also needs to come back as well, doesn't it? But I have largely achieved, and running kind of helps because your feet are a lot more in the air and making less contact with the surface. But I've largely kind of achieved the purpose. And now I do the same kind of thing. I put a keyframe there and then put another one at the bottom of the steps and then carry on forward to get to this point here, down there like that. Okay, there's because that foot's raised, that's the reason it's there like that. I might want to fine tune those particular values. But I could blend to an idle. There you go. You can see the shadow. This is the lighting that we've got in the scene here. What I want to show you now, finally, because I'm conscious that this is something we want to spend a bit more time on because there's more complexity involved in this, but the essential principles, blending animations, adding keyframes. The other key element is to bring in a camera so we can actually frame what it is that we're looking at, because we've got two pieces of action here going on. So if I was to pull out, because we should come back to the beginning here. The sedate Mr. Pink and the exuberant Mr. Green, both moving at the same kind of time. So let's stick a camera on at least one of them. And what I'm going to do, let's focus on, let's do a camera on Mr. Green. Now the cameras in Unreal are very flexible, and we'll be covering them in more detail when we look at sequences and the kind of way that you can use them in conjunction with other kind of editing programs. Now, to get round, I probably need to extend this scene, or what's kind of clever, but let's say we want this particular angle, and we grab some more bits of scenery to fill in this gap here, or find some other solution to it. But this is kind of quite nice to have this. Let's see what kind of running up towards us here like this, roughly somewhere like that. What I can do is come here and choose create camera here. Choose the second of these options, cine camera, because you've got more flexibility with this. So I choose that. What happens then? You get a viewfinder here that shows you the view through the camera itself. And if you click away and click on something else, that disappears. You come back there, it appears. Sometimes it's useful to pin this so you can see, although you move around the scene, you can see, yeah, that's how I've got that framed up at the moment. And because we need to add this to the sequence, first of all, I'm going to rename this because I'd like to have lots of cameras going on in the scene. So I kind of name them numerically. I've got it highlighted, so I can go over here to track, choose act, sequence, add camera 01. Now you see we've got an actual camera track here now. And if I click this, that means it will actually show what's on the camera. I pinned this. No, I haven't. That's unpinned. So it will disappear. But the way it's useful to work, once you've got a camera, you want to be able to move around the scene and see the camera in the scene, but also see what you see through the camera, if that makes sense. So to best achieve that, what you want to do is to create two panes. So we've got just one default pane here like this. I tend to have them side by side. That's where I prefer to work. And on this side, let's unpin, unpin. Right, good. On this side, I tend to have the perspective view, so I can actually move around this scene and see the camera that I'm looking through. And this one, I want to see what I see through the particular camera. So there is the camera we added in the scene. Now the reason we didn't necessarily see it before then is because you see the camera track actually starts there. So that's when the black borders come down, and that's when we see that. And I can actually use this window to see where is that camera. Of course, I could come here and just use the F key, and it will take me to the camera. So cam 01, press F, there it is there, like that. Okay, but this is what I'm seeing through the camera itself. So I've got a camera there. And I've got the transform that we saw with the characters. So this enables me to change their location, rotation, and don't want to muck around with their scale. I'm not sure what exactly that would do in the context of a camera. But let me add, now I've added them there, but what frame is that? 53. Well, that's okay because we started at 60, didn't we? So yeah, I'm adding the camera. Let's go back as far as frame 30. So I've added a start position for the camera. Let's go to that. You've got additional parameters that you can use in relation to the camera, namely the aperture, so I can set a keyframe for that, the focal length, and the focal distance. So to start with, at the moment that's got a very extreme kind of wide angle on it, so 11 millimeters. Typically you might have maybe 28 or 35 mil. Now, obviously, the framing has gone to pop now. So, first thing I probably want to do is to tilt the camera. And maybe that solved part of my problem of not having the landscape there to deal with. And, okay, let's start with a 35 mil camera there. Probably want to move it. Doesn't look like it's quite center or quite off center, so then it's going to be this one location. And think about the framing there. Do I like the height of the camera, or do I want to bring it down a bit? Let's see. Okay, now I can see what the framing of that looks like. What I can do is think, where's my end point here in this shot is here. Am I going to animate the camera or have a static camera and have it kind of framed up around that end point? So let's assume that's the end point, because as I recall, yes, it does get to the top of the stairs and it's not going to go any further because that's the length of the animation. So why don't I just have this camera coming to the foot of the stairs, and if I need to know where that is, I'll put a keyframe in there because that's when it starts going up. So good. So in fact, could correspond with that there. That's where my next keyframe is going to be, because that's the point at which it can start going up. So we could switch to a different camera at that point. Let's try that. So I'm going to put in some keyframes there. Yep. Here. Camera 1. And am I happy with the framing of that? So by there, probably come down a bit because we lose the feet, then might as well have been all the frame all the time. So this is the one I'm going to work to because it's the last frame I'm using. So let's take the camera down a bit. There. Okay, and let's just roughly take that and replicate that because I don't want the camera moving down, because I've set up the camera to see you've got a slight. That doesn't make sense. So let's keep the camera static. So 1199, 200, who cares? And then back here, 1200 again. So same values there and there. Lost a bit of the head. Easiest way out of that, I think, is just to pull out slightly. Oh, God, yeah. Now there, top of the lights. Okay. And that's the point where we're going to change to another camera. So this is the beauty of this. Where do I want this other camera to be? Well, let's move the playhead to here and think about how we're going to frame up this next shot. So let's move here. Just coming up the stairs, let's try a side on. And we know we're going to end. Could try top down. Maybe a bit overly dramatic. I've only got a fixed kind of viewpoint here, so I could drop a camera in here and then muck around with the focal length. So let's try create a camera here. Cine camera actor. This, unsurprisingly, will be called Cam 02. Add Cam 02. It should be selected to add Cam 2. Yep. And that's there like that. Now, at the moment, we're just seeing that there, and what I need to do is to come here, and it's about there, isn't it? So I'm going to move the playhead here and choose camera cuts, camera 2 from this point. It's gone slightly early, but it's just simply a question of sliding that there, so I can. Now, a gotcha that does it's worth remembering is that as you add cameras, you can sometimes turn off the syncing between the cutting between the camera tracks. You need to make sure that's selected so that as you go there and right now we'd obviously have the film start with him running, so we would probably could either move him right back and have him running into the frame. That's probably the most sensible thing. This is where I'm going to go into my minus figures here. So let's just quickly do that, because it's just a bit. So scroll up these, so I've got a bit of room to play with. The thing I'm interested in is Mr. Green. Here he is, and pull back here. Mr. Green's transform path. I want him to be right back here out of shot. So let's try taking this here, moving this back to about here, and then moving his position there. Now I might need to go even further into the minus numbers just to. So let's change this to -100. So now okay, let's just play this. And yes, absolutely, the running animation needs to then pull back to cover that, otherwise it's just sliding along. So here he comes running along. So now we've got him entering the frame. Now the cut's in the wrong position because I wanted the cut. So let's scroll down here, pull this camera back. I want this camera now to start. Yeah, well, that's kind of nice, but there's not the scenery to support that, and we've got a bit of a hole here, so I probably would come tighter on this shot, but it's kind of quite nice. I'd probably slow that down. I like the long shadow, and maybe do something a bit more with that. I had a bit more time, so character coming along there. I'm not sure about the speed. Probably want to tweak that. And what's the point of what? Want to cut that? It's coming along here. There, probably round about there. Let's move it roughly to about there. Running, and hit this. That's a bit of a jump because okay, I probably want to try that. Okay, that's better. It's not ideal, partly because the animation's too kind of side by side, but we'll be looking at that when we look at animation in more detail. I want to finish by saying, okay, so we've got a little sequence here. I could obviously do a lot more to brush this up, but now our sequence effectively runs from this point out of shot. We have this kind of mysterious shadow, and we think, what's happening there? I'd probably make more of that. Comes into shot there, moving towards the camera, and then we do the over the head shot. Probably square that up more so that we have a symmetrical, comes up, goes down, and then we go to a different shot once it comes off the stairs the other side. But let's say our movie now starts at frame -50 and runs to frame 200. Okay. So what I'm going to do is now create a movie. I'm not going to save it this time because I don't want to do this a third time. To export a movie, here, render this movie to a video, you click here. And it saves as an AVI, which is a movie sequence. You can save it as individual images, but most usefully, if you're going to take it into Premiere or After Effects and then do some post-processing on it. As you can see, this is set at a kind of widescreen, so 16:9. You can do it at different resolutions all the way up to 4K. It's compressed, and here, because we have mucked around, I want to export a particular range of frames. So from -50, I think I said, to 200. And then if I click capture movie, it will play back the movie, capture it, and then you will find the finished file in wherever you created your Unreal project. So where did I create it? Yes, this PC, F drive, under Unreal, under course, and under here, project file. There's the thing you launched the first time. There's a folder called saved, and then there is within that there will be a folder called video captures. Within that you'll find the finished movie. You can then bring that into Premiere, After Effects, Resolve, or whatever it is that you prefer, and then work on it further. So I'm not going to press that capture, but this is where I'm going to conclude this